We are back once again. General Tom Wilkerson, the head of the U.S. Naval Institute, is back with us talking about America's military, our place in the world, and the cost of doing business as America. When you take a look at what has been spent,
oh yes,
over since we went into Iraq, for instance, what do you think? How do you react to that?
Well, there's a train wreck coming, and it's one that the president-elect's going to have to confront. The train wreck is there's only so much money that the Congress can actually allocate, called discretionary spending, and 50% of that is the defense budget, and that's not enough to keep going, and with all of the fundamental problems we have in our financials and the economy. So the train wreck is look at what we're going to do and how we're going to allocate resources, and defense has got to take a little bit of a hit.
Are we going to have to make decisions or alter some strategic positioning in order
I think
to
we've already started
budgetary?
to do that. Secretary Gates has made some pronouncements that no secretary before him has done in trying to focus the efforts of the Defense Department. There's a trickle-down effect. Everybody hangs their wish list in the military on the national security strategy, the national military strategy, because it says what we're supposed to do, and then each of the services says, here's how I contribute. Well, he said, we're going to win these wars first, and then we're going to focus on other things. Now, that sets a different set of priorities, but we are going to have to make some trade-offs because defense is too large to continue this way. We don't have enough money.
I'm old enough and been in the business long enough to remember the days when the Soviet Union certainly was out there and how we had to position ourselves in that Cold War era.
It's a funny joke. Gee, what would we do when you lose your best enemy?
That's it. And we talked about exactly. We talked about the peace dividend. They're gone. Look at all this extra money that we're going to have to do all sorts of things with. Did you ever expect a quote-unquote peace dividend to actually be there? Well, let's address that first of all.
There's something that's called a strategic inflection point that Andy Grove at Intel characterized in the book he wrote about his time. And what it basically is when you wake up one morning and you discover that almost everything you learned that got you to today, you know is not going to get you to tomorrow. That's where I think we are as a country, and in the defense of this country in the Defense Department. Because the things that we learned growing up, World War II, major conventional operations, victory. Korea, more major conventional, not so much victory.
Stalemate. Yeah.
The Cold War, though, major conventional and nuclear confrontations against a recognized peer competitor, and we won. They quit, we won the day. And now we're looking at folks who don't play by those rules, and we're having trouble accommodating it. See, we spend so much money on defense, and then a guy buys an IED and blows up some of our Americans. It doesn't balance out.
Is there a way to, I mean, you can't budget then what you need to do to deal with that, or can you?
Well, it's going to be difficult because part of it's cultural, too.
Yeah.
Our culture of the American Armed Forces, we break things. Our job is to rearrange real estate, make mountains out of valleys, to vent force on another country.
Well, and it's not, maybe some people are uncomfortable hearing it, but this is what the mission of the military is. We build warriors who are there if and when we unfortunately have to go to war. But in many respects, I mean, do you view the issue now with terrorism as a military issue or a criminal issue? I mean, could we do it better if we did it, you know, cloak and dagger and police-like?
It depends on where you do it. After all, what we're trying to do right now, and the problem I see, and the part that you're talking about is, how do you work with an enemy that hasn't listened to the lecture and doesn't react the way you want him to react? So we're trying, and this is kind of a fundamental thing, we're trying to make America so that we go to war and it's almost like surgery. Okay? It's very pristine, it's very clean, it's very nice.
All those pictures that we saw of the smart bombs going in. You served on the staff of Admiral Crow and General Powell as well.
And the fact is, in those times and in other times, with lawyers looking over your shoulder saying, be careful about innocent civilians, which is true. You must be. But in the end, what that means is we go to war with false expectations. We think it's going to be nice and clean and neat, and nobody's going to get hurt except the bad guys. War is not that way.
No.
And it's never going to be that way because the other guy has a vote. And he can tell you, while you're doing all those fancy rules of engagement, I'm going to hide over here in this orphanage, and I'm going to make your life miserable and shoot at you. And that's not a neat thing.
Are we going to, we touched on this a moment ago, but I mean, in terms of what Secretary Gates, who's going to be held over into the Obama administration, has been saying, have we endangered ourselves in terms of our ability to spend the kind of money necessary to protect us against those asymmetrical threats?
Well, and here's the question. Let me take that one step further.
Sure.
Tell me why we're there. Okay? I mean, if you look at Bob Woodward's book, there's a very, very interesting, among all the other interesting things, cabinet meeting. And they bring Paulson from Treasury in to be a sanity check, talking about the surge. And when they get through, he says something to the effect of, what's the goal? And there was silence in the cabinet room. Well, now this is 6 years into a conflict and we don't know what we're doing. Yeah. I go back a lot to Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, No Ordinary Time, about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his wife, and how they worked through going to World War II. You don't have to like unconditional surrender, but it's hard to misinterpret it. And if that's the goal, you know when to stand up and cheer. Tell me when to stand up and cheer for Iraq. Tell me when to stand up and cheer in Afghanistan to know that we've done something. And by the way, make sure we understand that in the process of expending our precious treasure, including our lives, that we're getting a return on that that's worth the effort.
We hear people say, you know, we've got to get out of Iraq, and the president-elect has said we've got to commit more to Afghanistan. Do you agree with that?
I talked to some folks the other day and did a little research just for fun to make sure I understood. It appears for 25 centuries, conquerors have marched back and forth across Afghanistan, and they've thought that they had conquered the tribes that were there. And they've found out from Alexander to today that they weren't so smart and they hadn't done it all. And the most recent example, the Russians were there for 9 years with over 140,000 Soviet troops, and they left with their tail between their legs.
Right. But we thought we did it better, and it looked until a couple of years ago like we had done most of the job, although many say if we had just not taken our eye off the ball and gone to Iraq, we would have clinched it, and then we could have just gotten the heck out of there, too. No?
They might be smoking something will get them arrested. Yeah. When Rudy Giuliani was running for president, he used to talk about being His Honor the mayor, and he had a good, interesting thing to talk about how he cleaned up the city, since we're here in the city. He said he used to send a bunch of policemen into one of the boroughs to get all the druggies and guys out, and we did. And then a funny thing happened. When I moved the task force to the next borough, they all came back. Now fast forward and turn it into the military. We cleaned them out of Afghanistan and found out they were in Pakistan.
Well, let's take the break right now and see how we try to deal with an enemy that pops up country to country to country. Back with General Wilkerson in a moment. Don't go away.